More and more children are out of school, but parents don't want math learning to stop. They're turning to Mathnasium at home. Real-time math instruction tailored to your child's exact educational needs. It's the same face-to-face live instruction used in our centers for over 15 years, now on a computer. Your child can keep their math skills sharp, catch up, or soar ahead, from home or anywhere with an internet connection. To learn if Mathnasium at home is right for your child, visit mathnasium.com/at-home. Mathnasium at home, changing lives through math.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Mathnasium Schoolhouse. I am John, the AVP of Education and Training for Mathnasium, and I want to thank you all for joining me for another episode in the Mental Math series. So if you've joined me for the first one or the first two, remember what we're really trying to do is go over some of those really cool mental math and number sense techniques that we practice at our Mathnasium centers. So if you're Mathnasium students, and you've probably seen a lot of these before. If you're not familiar with Mathnasium, I hope to teach you some things and some of the unique ways that we look at math. This is a mental math session, but it's, if the question is, can you write things down? You definitely can. I will write some things down too. And it really is just to give you some things to think about later. And kind of if I were, kind of in your brain and you were thinking about these questions mentally, what would I see? So as with everything else, there are some really awesome ways to do these problems mentally. Quite often, pretty much every time there's more than one. And the more you do this and the more you practice, the more you'll start to see the ways that make the most sense to you and the ways that, when you see problems like this that you prefer. So, as always, especially with this, I really want you to, I know it's Friday. I want you to try, always do your best and work really hard. Leave your answers in the comments. And if there's another way that you like to look at these, even better, share those with the group. And let's just have a little bit of fun and stretch our brain. So if you're a parent, you can practice these techniques with your child later. And like I said, I will write some of these things down for you to remember and reference, or if you want to watch this video again, this way you can, as you're talking to your child, which is always a really good thing to do when you're talking math with your child, that you'll remember what we talked about today. We will be doing some addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, maybe a couple things around halves. And so if you're comfortable with those, that's awesome. If maybe you're struggling or just learning some multiplication and division, that's okay too. We'll go through these. I'll go as slowly as I can, and you can always watch it again later. I also there should be a worksheet available to follow along, but I will write all of the exercises down as we go through them so that you can write them down too if you don't have a worksheet. So with all of that said, let's take a deep breath and get our brains warm, and let's get started. So the first problem I want to look at is 199 plus 299 plus 397. Okay. And some of you, when you see problems like this, you may start writing it like this. And you need to be able to do that too, but I want to not immediately go there. I just want to think about this for a moment. And think about what numbers these are really close to. I want to write a problem that's sort of like the one that I was given, with numbers that are a little bit friendlier to help me. Okay. So those are all really close. 199 is close to 200 and so on. So now if I want to add 200, 300, and 400, I get 900. But then you have to ask yourself, did I solve the same problem? And not quite. I changed all three of these numbers. And now the question is, did I add too much or not enough? And I made all three of these bigger, which means this is too big. So I need to adjust it. And I'm going to subtract 5 from 900 to give me my answer. Okay. And I subtracted 5 because I added 1 here, I added 1 here, and I added 3 here. 1 plus 1 plus 3 is 5, which means it's too big by 5, and I took 5 away. Okay? So if you've been with me before, we've been building up on these types of problems. We've been adding, making them bigger. If you're new, we often look for friendly numbers to help us do our mental math. So that's just an example. Okay, here's one that's just like it, with one small difference. So let's try that one. Okay, and if you got 448, great job. Okay. Let's look at this in the exact same way. So all three of these numbers, even though they're not close to hundreds, they're close to other friendly numbers. Remember, not just multiples of 10 or multiples of 100 or multiples of 1,000, but there's some things sometimes in between that are friendly too. So 250, 50, and 150, we should be comfortable with those too. Okay. So 200 plus 50 plus 150 is 450. And then you have to look back to what you started with and see if I need to adjust it at all. And I do. Okay. I made this smaller, I made this bigger, and I made this bigger. Okay, so you just have to think about how you want to adjust. Okay. I added 3 here, and I added 1 here, which is 4, but I need to take 2 away here. Okay, and I get 448. So that's not so bad. Let's take a look at some that are subtraction. So 305 minus 99. So in the same way, you may look at this problem and you may write it this way. And that's okay, you need to be able to do that, but let's look at it mentally. So what is 99 really close to? 99 is really close to 100. So we can look at 305 minus 100, and so we start with 305 and we just take 100 away. Now my question is, when I changed this 99 to 100, did I subtract too much or not enough? Because when I do 305 minus 100, I need to figure out if I have to adjust my answer. Okay. When I change that 99 to 100, I subtracted too much. Okay, which means that this is too small and I have to add 1 more to it. I get 206. Okay. Let's look at another subtraction problem kind of like that. So 217 minus 98. And this is one that if you saw it, maybe you would write it and try to subtract with borrowing. Let's look at it in a different way. Think about what 98 is really close to. It's very similar to the last one we did. So if you got 119, you were correct, which is awesome. Great job. 217 is very close to 100, so I want to subtract 100 first. And that gives me 117. But when we change the numbers, we always have to think about, okay, I didn't quite solve the original problem I was given, so how do I adjust my answer? Well, 100 is bigger than 98, which means I subtracted too much. And I subtracted 2 too much, which means this is too small. I have to add 2 to get my final answer. So very good. So now we're warmed up with some addition and subtraction. Let's take a look at a couple multiplication problems. So 20 times 8 times 50. So on this one, kind of like the addition and subtraction, we were finding, hundreds or, multiples of 10, kind of friendly. And this is a little bit different. But when we're looking at multiplication, we kind of want to start looking at things like that. And what's cool about multiplication is that I can kind of multiply in any order. If I want to multiply the 20 and the 50 first, that's okay. And you can multiply 20 times 8 first, and then multiply 160 times 50. And for some of you, that works. That makes sense. But my question is, what is 20 times 50? And that we know that multiplying times multiples of 10 isn't so bad. 20 times 50 is 1,000. Okay. We can think of it as 2 times 5 is 10, and then add 2 zeros. That helps. Well, then I just have to think about what's 1,000 times 8, and I get 8,000. So if you got 8,000, awesome. So it doesn't have to be just addition and subtraction where we kind of find friendly numbers or friendly pairs. Multiplication, we try to do the exact same thing. Okay. Let's look at another one that you get a chance. I'll give you a moment to try this one. So 40 times 9 times 50. If you think about the way that we did this, the previous one, we looked at the 40 and the 50 first, and multiplying multiples of 10 isn't so bad. I can think of 4 times 5 is 20, and I'm going to add 2 zeros to it, one for each zero here, and I get 2,000. And then I just have to think about what's 2,000 times 9. Now the final answer, and I can think of this in a similar way. 9 times 2 is 18. And I have these 3 zeros left over. I get 18,000. You can also think of it as 40 times 10 times 50, because 9 is really close to 10. And 40 times 10 is 4,000, times 50 is 20,000. But then you have to adjust it. Okay. And this one gets a little bit tricky if you try to do it this way. It's not so bad. That's another way to think of it. But 40 times 10 times 50 is 20,000. But I made this bigger. And then you have to figure out what you have to subtract from there. Well, I have one more 2,000. It's actually 2,000 too big. So then I can go back to 18,000 that way. So there's a couple different ways to look at that one, and you just decide which one you like the best. Maybe there was another way that you chose to look at it that you like even better. But the beautiful thing is that you stretch your brain and think of all the different ways to approach this problem. And then from then you decide which one you like the best, which one makes the most sense to you. And what's even better is if you take some of these problems that we've been working on and you start creating your own, because you can. If you're sitting, or if you're a parent and you want to start thinking about, well, what's 70 times 8 times 90? And think about multiplying these first and then multiplying times 8, or make this 100 and see what happens. Just little things that you can do to practice. And this is where math is fun. Whether you realize it or not, or if you think it's fun, this is where math is really interesting. And you're all very smart and you can do it. Okay, let's talk about some division. Let's start with maybe some multiples of, let's talk about 375 divided by 5. So what would you do here? Think about what might be friendly that is divisible by 5. I mean, 375, because it ends in 5, is divisible by 5, and maybe you know this one right off the bat. Or think about something that may be a little bit friendlier that's connected to one of your multiplication facts, like 35 divided by 5 isn't so bad. That's 7. So then what would 350 divided by 5 be? You just add a 0 there. Maybe that helps some of you. Even 40 divided by 5, you get 8. So then 400 divided by 5 has to be 80. So while 375 is kind of weird, it's 35 and 40, or 350 and 400 are kind of more connected to your facts that you may know. And what's cool about this is that 375 is right halfway in between 350 and 400. So what do you think this solution is? It's exactly halfway between 70 and 80. You can think of it as being 75. Because that's what it is. You can't think of it that way, that's what it is. So that's one way. One of these days, I'm going to do a lesson with you all on short division, because I think that's really helpful for some of you. Here's another way to think of it. One way that I like to think of it also is, if you took 37 and divided 5 into it, how many times does 5 divide into 37? How many 5s fit inside of 37? And how many left over? So 5 goes into 37 7 times with 2 left over. So there's your 7. And I have 2 left over. Now the question is, what's 25 divided by 5? And I get 5. One of these days we'll do a short division lesson, which is cool because you can do that all mentally, and that helps you too. There's a lot of ways to think of this. You can think of it as 350 divided by 5 plus 25 divided by 5. That works too, which is cool. So there's a bunch of different ways. All right, let's try one kind of like it. What's 225 divided by 5? So maybe you want to look at it this way, because 225 is halfway between, right in the middle. So if you can figure this out or this, then you'll have your answer. If you got 45, you're right. You can think of how many times 5 goes into 22 with how many left over. I have a 2 left over here. I can do it that way too. So many different ways to think about this. So I want you to start thinking on, look at the problem, see if you can figure out a really cool mental way. What do you know that it's close to or connected to? Okay. Let's take a look at some more division, but let's look at it in a different way. So how about 140 divided by 4? And if you've been practicing your division in school or at home, maybe write it that way. And just like everything else, you need to be able to do it this way too. It's important to be able to do long division. When you see a problem like this, I want you to think of it first in a different way. And when you divide by 4, what I want you to know is that's the same as taking that number and cutting it in half and then cutting it in half again. Okay, so when you see divided by 4, I want you to think of it as take that number, cut it in half once, and then cut it in half twice. That's the same as dividing by 4. I'll bet some of you, when you started today, would never have thought that you could do 140 divided by 4 in your head. Okay? So remember, divided by 4 is the same thing as cutting it in half and cutting it in half again. So what's half of 140? And you get 70. And what's half of 70? 35. So 140 divided by 4 is 35. So if you're really good with finding halves, in a Mathnasium, we spend a lot of time talking about halves for this reason. Because division sometimes is tricky, but if you're really good at finding halves, then you can start doing these mentally too. And a lot of times you're really great with halves and you want to be able to use that. Okay. Here's a different one. Let's talk about 150 divided by 12. And I want, if you're having a hard time getting started, I want you to think about the factors of 12. So 12 is 1 times 12. It's 2 times 6. It's 3 times 4. And then all my reverse facts, 4 times 3, and so on. And then I want you to think about these factors and think about 150 and maybe some numbers, one of those factors that is really friendly with 150 that divides, that you can kind of tell what divides into it. Okay. So what I mean by that is 150 divided by 3, that's not so bad. Because if you practice your multiplication, you know 15, or your division, your multiplication facts and your division facts, they're connected, right? 15 divided by 3 is 5. So 150 divided by 3 is 50. Okay. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is dividing by 12, you can think of it as being the same as dividing that number by 3 and then dividing the result by 4. So what this means is I can take this and divide it by 4 and get my final answer. And I get 12 and a half. Now, and we talked about how an easy way to divide by 4. So remember, I can take this number and cut it in half and cut it in half again. So 50, half of 50 is 25, and half of 25 is 12 and a half. If you're really good with money, $150 divided by 6 isn't so bad, and that's 25, and you can start there. And that's not so bad because if you practice your money, that there are 6 quarters in $1.50. So maybe you thought of it that way. Dividing by 12 is the same as dividing by 6 and then dividing by 2. So all I would have to do is cut this in half and I get 12 and a half. So 150 divided by 3 divided by 4, 150 divided by 6 divided by 2. Those are all ways to think of 150 divided by 12. Maybe you thought of it as 144 divided by 12 first, and then you added 6 divided by 12 to it. And that works too. Okay. Couple more. I know I've been stretching your brain. Let's think about 8 times 1.5. And see what you get there. So think of this as what's 8 times 1, which is 8, and hold that in your head. And then what's half of 8? It's 4. You held that 8 in your head, and 8 plus 4 is 12. Your final answer is 12. So when you start seeing things like this, think of them in pieces. 8 times 1 is 8, and half of 8 is 4. Put those together, and you get the final answer, which is 12. Let's look at one that's kind of the same. So then what about 12 times 2.5? I'll give you a minute and think about that one. So it's the same idea. It's a little bit bigger. What's 12 times 2? Double 12. That's 24. Hold that in your head. What's half of 12? 6. And what's 24 plus 6? You get 30. Let's go back. Let's do a division problem here. So 10 divided by 2.5. So the question is, how many 2.5s fit inside of 10? And this one is tricky for you all because that's weird. You don't ever really see that too much, right? That's just a weird problem to even think about. So you don't think of it that way. I mean, you don't quite see too many problems like this, right? So think about 2.5, and what happens if you double 2.5? You get 5. So there are 2 2.5s in 5, and how many 5s are in 10? You get 2. So 10 divided by 2.5 is 4. So there are two 2.5s and 5, and 2 5s and 10, so I get 4. If you've been studying proportions in school, what's cool is you can also think of this as, if I do double this and I double this, I actually get that answer too. And I don't have to adjust it at all. If I change these equally, if I double this 10 and I double this 2.5, I get the same result, I get 4. There's another way to think of it too, which helps. So let's look at one more. Same idea. 26 divided by 6.5. I showed you a couple different ways to do that one. So think about what would happen if you doubled 6.5. Or you can double this and this. As long as you do it equally, you're okay. There are two 6.5s and 13. There are two 13s and 26. Or 52 divided by 13. There are 4 13s and 52. Either way, you get 4. Okay. So now it's up to you to practice. We talked about a lot of stuff today. We talked about addition, subtraction, multiplication, a bunch of division. I want you to start thinking about taking the problem that you're given and how you can connect it to something or a problem that's friendlier for you to solve. And then once you've solved it, think about if you have to adjust it. And there's nothing wrong with trying things and seeing if it works. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But experimenting in math is really important. And as you get older and you're problem solving, you try to find a bunch of different ways to solve the same problem. And sometimes you try something and it doesn't quite work. And it's all connected to this. It's the same idea. So as always, I really appreciate you joining me for this mental math session. There's a worksheet available for you to practice. And I hope you do practice and have a lot of fun with it. Have fun. Show your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, grandparents, guardians, whoever it may be, some of the stuff that you've learned, and practice. Just practice math every day. And I, again, thank you for all your hard work. I will be back next Friday. We're going to be talking about some math magic. And I will be reading your mind with a really cool math problem next Friday. We will be back with Mathnasium Schoolhouse on Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific. Thanks. Bye for now.
It's afternoons that seem to be the most hectic for us, so it was much more convenient when we found Mathnasium at home.
All right, so how do we do half of 5? I think one of the best things about at home is that it really feels like you're almost at home with the student in their house teaching them.
I'm in my comfort zone.
You can just ask for help and the instructor will come right to you.
With Mathnasium at home, I know that they're getting the help that they need.
Awesome, great job.
Mathnasium, changing lives through math.